So today I'm providing some practical tips in another one in my series. This one's on working with the governor's legislative unit. And in the past few weeks, I talked with a number of the staffers, both current and former staff in the governor's legislative unit, the legislative deputies, and have put together some practical tips that have been shared with me for when professional advocates and legislative staff and others work with the governor's legislative unit deputies. Now, to be fair, some of these recommendations may seem obvious, but a number of them bear repeating, especially because the governor's leg unit staff reiterated them. So anyways, let's get to some of the suggestions that have been shared with me. First, always identify the client or clients that you're engaging on behalf of. And when you request a meeting, for example, what's the topic and a position? And you should, of course, provide the meeting participants in advance. Also, because there's limited space in the Capitol building in the current swing space for the governor's ledge unit. Also, when you support your or when you submit, your support or opposition letter, and certainly when you're requesting a signature or veto, be sure to send that letter to leg.unit for ledge unit at gov.ca.gov. You do not mail the letters. You don't hand them off or drop them off at their office. Submit them to that email, leg.unit at gov.ca.gov. The staff also said that the earlier you communicate any concerns, the better off you'll be. In other words, several of them repeated, if the first time that the governor's office is hearing about an issue with a bill is when the bill hits their desk, you're in a lot of trouble. Remember, about 2,500 bills roughly get introduced every year, and 1,000 or more of those get down to the governor's desk. At the end of the session, the author's letter, and certainly if you're the sponsor of a letter, and even any other letters of support that you might secure, they said to submit those letters again to the ledge unit email within 3 days of the final floor vote as they begin quickly putting together their bill folders for the governor. You don't need to attach any additional documents to your signature request or veto request when the bill is in enrollment. Instead, only send the letter requesting the signature or veto by the governor. Naturally, I hope this is naturally, a letter should be addressed to the governor with the subject line requesting the governor's signature or veto, and do a single bill, not multiple bills. So don't include more than one bill in your letter. Request the signature or request a veto of only one bill. They really said to have a concise letter, but of course provide sufficient detail. The staff said 4 things. 1, the letter should address the problem being addressed by the bill. 2, whether or not a change in law is necessary at the state level. As you can imagine, this is really for the proponent or sponsor of a bill. 3, whether the proposed law change can be implemented. And 4, whether the cost of the bill, if there's any, has an impact on the state budget. It's also often helpful to include any real-world examples, they said, of the problem that's being addressed by the bill and why a state solution is needed. For example, why can't the local governments handle this situation? It's really important to include contact information in your letter, especially a number where a real live person can be contacted directly by the governor's legislative unit, any employees there, because if they have any last minute questions or things they want to raise, they need to be able to reach a person as quickly as possible. Don't forget to engage early, not only with the governor's office, but also the executive branch entity that has jurisdiction over an issue. And if you're going to run a bill through the legislative process that's going to impact some agency or department of the executive branch, your best bet is to begin outreach with them sometime in the fall before the session starts. You know, a lot of the larger state agencies and departments may have literally hundreds of bills that they're looking at during the session. So for them in particular, early engagement is really helpful. Approach, again, any relevant department or agency before you contact the governor's office. I don't know what your experience is, but certainly it's always been mine that the governor's staff will ask you, what does agency or department say? And frankly, most of them will push you back to meet with the department or agency. And don't forget, these folks talk regularly. That is the legislative unit deputy with the relevant deputies, either at agency or at a department. And be sure that if you've got communication with a state agency or department or the governor's office directly, to keep that going as the bill moves through the process. But at the same time, it's also been emphasized to me that the ledge deputies can't have multiple meetings on the same legislation with the same people, you know. So you may have one shot, maybe if you're lucky two, but that's probably about it. Of course, make sure that your meeting request to the governor's ledge unit is timely. And if this is a follow-up, then make sure that you have new or updated information in any of your subsequent communications or meetings, not just a reiteration of what you've already met or talked about. It was shared with me that phrases like that's interesting or something along those lines does not represent an agreement or even that the legislation is a particularly good idea. Now, if a ledge deputy says that a meeting with him or her is not necessary, don't necessarily read anything into it. For example, they actually may not have any questions about the legislation. Maybe they've already discussed the bill with others, for example, who hold the same or similar position. They may have even met with the author or the author's staff. And don't forget that just like with legislative staff and committee staff, the email deluge from folks into the governor's ledge unit deputies is pretty significant. They've got lots of emails dealing with their job functions, but they do appreciate email etiquette. And when you are contacting them, make sure that there's a clear idea in the subject line. Make sure that they can easily see what the ask is and put all the relevant info into the body of the email. It's probably less desirable, frankly, to have attachments unless they're really somehow imperative to your communication. It was also suggested to me by several ledge deputies that it's often helpful to meet with executive branch agency or department staff at the beginning of the year to discuss what they see in the upcoming session and what you do, and certainly expressing your client priorities. By the way, don't ever tell committee staff or author staff that the administration supports your bill unless there is an approved position from the Department of Finance or an agency or department on record. You should always return phone calls from the ledge unit very promptly. I've been told multiple times that some lobbyists have a bad habit of not responding or doing so when it's too late. In other words, you know, when the governor's office staff, especially in the ledge unit, reaches out like with a question on your bill, they obviously have a reason for doing so, and they're usually under significant time constraints. So again, it was told to me that make sure that contact information for a bill is available in case the ledge deputy has any questions or wants to talk to you. If the governor's office suggests amendments, I'm going to just throw it out there that it's probably not a suggestion if you want your bill signed. Anyways, you know, sometimes the governor's office and their departments and agencies can provide some technical assistance, even amendments to help fix your bill. But keep in mind that just because they might provide technical assistance, it doesn't mean that your bill's ultimately going to get signed. You know, as with dealing with legislators, their staff, committee staff, it's always important to be very straightforward. Note your bill's strengths, but also the weaknesses. Look, no bill is perfect. And I think even the governor's staff clearly understands that a bill comes with certain trade-offs. So, avoid puffery, but also avoid the doom and gloom as well, and be helpful with concrete examples and the implications of a bill. If your wonderful bill idea doesn't have a funding source or it's not in the budget, you may want to pursue a budget request or something else. Because, if the Department of Finance weighs in on your bill and they're opposed, that's a pretty high hurdle to overcome in the governor's office. And, if you happen to have like contact information, a cell phone number of the ledge unit deputies, be sure to not abuse that privilege. And as I've always said, in dealing with legislators, their staff, the committee consultants, executive branch agencies and departments, treat everyone involved in the legislative process, even the opponents of your bill or those on the other side, with the respect that everybody deserves, and always be honest in your dealings, no matter if it's the executive branch, the legislative branch, your colleagues in the lobby corps, or others involved in the legislative process.